It's ironic as that money is like Starlight, right? Ooh, yeah. Jamal 3000, Clanker, Clickaboo, George Troy, Rosa Sparks, Martin Luther Clanker simulation.
Oh, you're overheating, are ya? With that big CPU fan, bullshit. Now come on, George Droid. Looks like it's jail time for you, Rust Monkey. Mr. Droid?
This don't sound familiar to you? Hey guys, what's up, Imurgency, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are here and we're talking about something that I never thought would actually be a topic of conversation on this channel, or just a topic of conversation at all. None of the following words I'm about to say were ever mentioned in the Bible, but robot racism is now a thing. By now you may have seen videos, tweets, text posts, whatever what have you online. Most of the time being skits or like jokey jokes, talking about some not too distant future where our kids bring home a robot partner and our reactions to that. And the gag here is that the reactions here are typically somewhere along the lines of non-approval in a way that is very reminiscent to the 1950s when it comes to things like interracial relationships. And sure, hee hee ha ha, the parallels are kind of funny. Like, it's all fun and games to talk about like these hypothetical situations that may or may not actually end up taking place. But like most jokes or good fun memes on the internet, it's gotten weird. And that's because, for one, it's weird in general just to be joking about that era, because obviously at that time the parallels between white families not approving of interracial relationships between like a white and like any other race because of like not understanding or just like bigoted bias, and ultimately our generation when we are older having the same kind of outlook between what do I even call that, like inter-technological relationships between your kid and an AI robot. It's just strange because at that time parents and most of society was on the wrong side of history, blinded by bias and racism. And not saying this is going to be the case, this video is not meant to be like a AI rights video, because we know that's not what we do here on this channel, and I'm not saying that will necessarily be the case, but that's essentially the framework of the joke. Like, that's the whole point. Like, you know what you're doing when you're referencing like the old 50s aesthetic, having the traditional ways of like being problematic. Like, at that point it's just strange, and it gets even stranger when you see other videos of people out in the wild today using these types of jokes under the guise of like being problematic against AI and robots, when in reality it's just a way for you to be covertly racist. Like, it's so crazy that we've gotten to an era where today we're not speaking about marginalized communities, but rather taking the sentiment and the vibe of the oppressed words, phrases, and behaviors of those marginalized communities and turning that and using that against robots and AI as like the outgroup. And before we get further into this, I do want to acknowledge that like all of this is in no way as harmful as anti-interracial or racist rhetoric, but it's just still very weird and very odd that it's being framed as reminiscent of this sentiment. And I think it's important to contextualize this whole conversation in the real world as well. Looking back to where this whole trend started from, a lot of the jokes initially came about from these videos that would pop up on TikTok of these little robots roaming around different cities.
Can I have your Yes.
But these little technological creatures didn't just spawn out of nowhere. Let's take it back a bit. Of course, we must start in the place of service robots, because again, this is honestly where a lot of this started. In the US, service robots were introduced to the mainstream around 2021 in the form of delivery robots. You know, the little tubs on wheels that go and deliver your DoorDashes to you in like a really inconvenient way. They usually have like a little cute face on them with some lights, and they cross the street too, and people try to help them out. Like, you've seen them, or at least you've heard of them. I think in terms of service robots, Coco is the most known company, but there are also others such as Starship. And of course, these bots initially started off as simple service robots, taking on the tasks of food delivery services, which, as a quick caveat, we gotta remember to not attribute any human traits to robots. Like, I get how tricky it might be to subconsciously separate the two when the robot is taking up a traditionally human done task, but I think that's an important distinction, one that we're gonna get into more in the video. But I think we can't mention Cocos or like any form of food delivery service robot without talking about the violence enacted against these Cocos when they first hit the streets. I know personally, I prefer to not get a Coco just because the deliveries are never really right, and you actually have to go out and like mingle with the Coco, which in my opinion is a little bit more inconvenient than actually interacting with a person. And I know I'm not alone in this, because when Cocos initially hit the streets, many people were not with them. Like, there was a whole era where people were posting videos of them kicking down Cocos, enacting violence upon them, blocking their way, pushing them into traffic. Like, it was actually kind of scary. Like, again, I don't think we should be prescribing human emotions to these robot vehicles, but I think it's very telling of human behavior and the human condition to enact violence against an inanimate object and have these weird power trips over things that can't defend themselves. So I'm not quite sure Don't quote me on this, whether or not this is before or after this trend of like beating up Cocos happened, that they started making the Cocos look more cute and giving them more human-like features to make people feel more bad about like messing with the Cocos. I don't know what that's saying about human psychology or like marketing or both, but like that's there. And like, obviously, again, this is not the same as violence against like marginalized groups. It's just something to be said about how human nature tends to like othering things and treating the othered group terribly. And bringing this from 2021 to modern day, going a step further than just like being a nuisance to Cocos, but now inventing and promoting new slurs to be used against these robots that we see in real life.
Nothing but a wire-back silver number crunching clanker!
Why won't you adopt me? Because you're silver!
Sir, there are children.
Clanker! Kill you silver bolt dragon piece of scrap Clanker! Kill you silver bolt dragon piece of scrap Clanker!
Like, yes, there are bigger fish to fry here in the state of the world that we're living in right now. But I do think it's still important to see our reactions as people to new things that are popping up, because I think they are very telling also of the times that we're in and our susceptibility to fall down very, como se dice, problematic pipelines. And since we're on the topic of slurs, let's talk about it, because again, things have gotten strange. Y'all cannot be normal for anything. Like the Prime Video Twitter account really ate when they posted that thing that said the samurai was normal on the internet, because some of y'all need to relax. Like, why are we using slurs against robots right now? And they're not just like fake slurs. Well, some of them are fake slurs, but like a lot of them that are being used now are just real slurs, but just changing the first couple letters.
It's ironic, yeah, that's funny. It's like Star Wars, right? Yeah. Jamal 3000, Clanker, Clickaboo, George Troyd, Rosa Sparks, Martin Luther Clanker simulation. Rosa Sparks?
Like, are they actually real slurs? I think that's definitely debatable, and that's something that we're going to get into in a bit. But like the fact that the first instinct for so many people was to just go and try and create as many different slurs for robots as possible is actually insane. Like, we're making crazy strides in technology right now. Whether we agree it's for the greater good or not is still definitely up for debate, but it's undoubtedly groundbreaking stuff. And it's just so wild that the internet's first curiosity for all of this pertains to coming up with fake slurs to reference these innovations. Like, and you may be asking yourself, Rumi, why does it even matter? It's not that deep, because it's not like these robots are real anyway. Well, to that, I'd say, one, that's not necessarily the point entirely, and two, there actually is an implication behind the use of slurs and the path towards normalizing robot sentience and almost autonomy, which are big words for y'all are slurring robots into actually having sentience. Now walk with me here. Essentially, since slurs have previously mostly been used against living beings, now using them against AI, robots, and the likes is kind of inherently associating those properties to them as well.
One of the weirdest things about you guys using Clanker as a slur is that you're trying to dehumanize robots, but at the same time you're paradoxically humanizing them. I mean, think about it, we have plenty of derogatory terms for non-humans, like mongrel for dog or vermin for wild animals. And yet nobody would say that those are slurs, even though we do generally agree that Clanker is a slur. And that's because the idea of a slur requires a high degree of anthropomorphization in order to work. It's meant to insult a people group, so you first have to elevate the robot to near personhood before you can put it down. This is literally reflected in how Clanker draws its power from analogy to the actual N-word, or how the similar term wireback comes from the slur for Mexican people. That implicitly places Clanker on an equal footing with a human minority you don't like, which is already weird in and of itself. But now consider the alternative phrase cogsucker, which is also trending. That's clearly meant to be insulting, but it's not a slur because it doesn't equate itself with a specific kind of person. Same with the terms mongrel or vermin. They're demeaning to animals, but they don't claim to be slurs. So what you're actually doing with Clanker is you're personifying AI just enough to treat it as subhuman. And I recognize that it's supposed to be a joke, but the more we mentally legitimize artificial intelligence as human, even subconsciously, the easier it is to believe in misinformation or fall into a loop of AI psychosis.
I think this video really highlights the notion that when we use slurs, which are historically words used to dehumanize an oppressed minority group, we almost have to first humanize robots, at least subconsciously, to then go and dehumanize them with the slur. Like the good old lift them up to tear them down, so to speak. So taking this context, we have to remember that robots and AI are not human. Okay, let's repeat that to ourselves and let that sink in subconsciously. You got that? You deeped it? You believe it? Good. Now, while the public court of internet opinion has decided to make Clanker a slur, it even feels so nasty coming out my mouth. I'm sorry, y'all. What if it's actually not? I feel like given this breakdown of a slur, these words would necessarily classify as that. Because again, it is not human, but I guess the general consensus is that it is. I'm sure there's a whole field of psychology as to why people do things like this, but I can think of a few prominent factors just off the top of my head, namely the whole historical context concept of creating an in-group and an out-group, and how delegating those two groups gives a sense of control to the in-group. Now, why is this relevant with robots and AI? Well, just look at the news. AI is slowly taking over entry-level and mid-management jobs and is learning at expeditious rates. People are becoming dependent on it, using it to write emails, write essays, write resumes, using it as a therapist, which can be tricky at best and lead to AI-induced psychosis at worst. Like, think of Kendra and her psychiatrist. I have a whole video talking about AI as therapists and AI-induced psychosis, so you should go check that out if you haven't seen it already. And even in some cases, AI is being used in place of real-life partners or friends. This is to say that AI is taking facets of our lives that used to be occupied by us, by humans, and is slowly but surely expanding to other aspects of our lives. And I think subconsciously, this could be really unnerving for some people. We as a generation already feel that we don't have a ton of control or agency in our lives, especially right now. Like, think of the dating scene, the job market, the state of the world right now. But what we can control, unfortunately, is how we antagonize and almost outgroup AI by essentially anthropomorphizing it. We humanize it and then we make it our villain, someone to call a clanker, a bolt picker, a wireback, you name it. To be clear, on a longer time horizon, and by longer, we're talking about 15 to 20 years, not just 50 or 100 years, there will virtually be nothing that a human being can do that a machine can't do as well or better for a tiny fraction of the cost. And that's a quote coming from Adam Dorr, the director of research for Rethinks, a nonprofit, nonpartisan think tank that focuses on understanding disruptive technology. That's simply where the technology of artificial intelligence and robotics and automation is headed. And I think that's real. But getting to the specifics of these slurs, arguably one of the biggest ones to come out of this whole trend. And honestly, I think what kickstarted all of the others, which have progressively gotten worse and worse, is Clanker. Clanker derives as a Star Wars universe as a form of derogatory word towards the droids of that universe. I was never really a big Star Wars fan, so I didn't know this, but like, work. Adam Alexic, a linguist, author, and content creator best known across social media as the etymology nerd, told NPR that it's a derogatory term for robots that stems from the Star Wars universe dating back to 2005. It was referenced in Star Wars and the Clone Wars series that would call robots clankers because of the sound they made. It clearly implies clanking. And then we adopted it because it sounds useful. And while, again, this all initially started off as like good fun and games, it's a good joke against like all of the AI and robots, it's just gotten to a point where it's no longer just fun and games, and it's just getting strange at this point. Because again, there have been videos online of like different robots walking around the streets, usually in LA, and whether it's the gay bot, the roast bot, the Riz bot, or just a regular robot serving you water at Kura Sushi, people started to take to social media to call them clankers, to start slurring at them like a good old 1950s white man. And of course, people have tried to up the stakes more and more and more. And ultimately, what happens when you try and up the stakes on ironic racism is that you eventually circle around to just regular old racism. And that's kind of where we're at right now. Because again, this is not a robot rights, robot defense video. We're talking about how this meme for robots is actually telling more and impacting humans, specifically minorities. Because again, these robots don't have feelings. However, the way that we're starting to use these slurs against them is evolving now into a way to incorporate and integrate very harmful rhetoric underneath the joke, becoming more sneaky and ultimately problematic. Let me explain. I think the root of this issue is twofold, and one of these folds is bigger than the other. Was that crazy to say? When talking about the language that we're using, and specifically how we're using it, we have to contextualize it with racism. I know. Y'all hate the word. Y'all hate when I talk about it. Y'all hate when I bring it up. But like, it's real. And in America, it is entrenched in almost everything, whether you want to believe it or not, it is. And especially it is entrenched in this conversation because we're using slurs like we never used them before. Well, actually, no. We're using slurs that we have used before, but just switching them out and repackaging them so everyone can say them. Like, y'all want socially acceptable slurs so bad, and it is so strange to me. So we gotta talk about it because the inherent nature of a slur is to be used against another group of people. And the second fold, the smaller part of the fold, is AI misogyny. I know, you didn't think we'd be talking about that here, huh? Which more so looks at how we have gendered AI and robots, which again, by assigning them human characteristics, we are essentially also subscribing them to some of the human social issues that we do have to face and how that plays out. And I know, I'm ready to see the two woke friend comments in the comment section that it's all fun and games, it's not that deep, except it's no longer fun and games. There is no fun and there is no game to be played. Like, the apples are the fucking apples right now, okay? And if something is starting to sound a little sus, we should interrogate why, and specifically look at why it is that we are saying the things that we are saying. Because especially in this climate, y'all, we gotta be calling out stuff because it's too easy and too quick to slide back, as we've been seeing with what's been going on in the world. But we keep talking around it. Let's actually address what's going on with the slurs. Why are these slurs bad? What are they? And what's the problem? The main problem with these robot slurs, they're just essentially repackaged ones that we already use, well, not we, that oppressors have used against oppressed groups historically, but are just changed in a way that give people, white people, a pass to say the ones that they can't explicitly say against minorities. Like wireback, bolt picker. This one sounds too close for comfort, so I'm just gonna insert it right here. And Clanker with the hard ER. And don't forget about Cligger. These ones are just all too reminiscent of like real world slurs that are used against different groups of people. And it feels like this is just a currently acceptable way for people that can't use that slur to use that slur and be like, oh no, I'm using this to talk about this robot. Like this robot isn't real. It's not a person. It doesn't matter. The whole time, it really was never about the robot. You just wanted to say the slur. And it's clear that's becoming the case by the videos that have been posted online. Like it just seems like we've devolved to a place where this is just like the currently socially acceptable way to scratch that itch of saying a slur that you want to say so bad but can't. Like you're able to say these things that are similar enough that can also get like some laughs but won't get you canceled outright. And it just feels so obvious as to what people actually want to say. Because let's be honest, if we wanted to create some new slurs, if we wanted to create some new ones, we could. Why is it that we are exclusively repackaging ones that have already been used? Ones that are actually still to this day being used to dehumanize, oppress, and stoke fear upon marginalized groups to this day. Like again, it's not about hurting the robot's feelings. We don't care. Or like respecting robots more than humans. Again, we don't care. It's just so weird that people are obviously applying cultural contexts and connotations that exist with real people for an existing slur against real people, like making a distinction between Clanka or Clanker or Cligga and Cligger. Ooh, even saying it sounds weird. I might have to censor these, I'm sorry. Like, take a look at this.
Rosa Sparks was kicked off the boss.
This is Agent George Droid. I need more vent now.
Like the fact that these videos are referencing notable figures but making them like a little bit AI, like Rosa Sparks and George Droid. It's just so inappropriate and gross. Like it's no longer funny. It just reminds me of those times in like middle school or elementary school. This might be a niche experience for people of color, so I'm sorry for my white audience, where like white people would be really happy to say wigga instead of nigga. They would be like, oh yeah, I'm a wigga. And when you would react to that being like, wait, you can't say that, they would like gaslight you into being like, I didn't say it, I'm saying wigga, like I'm a white one. Like it feels like that kind of level of gaslighting and like that level of kind of towing the line, knowing what you're doing, which is the insidious part, but like twisting it so you can't technically get in trouble. It's just weird because you're creating scenarios where things that have actually happened that are very similar in rhyme that have deeply affected the Black community and other communities of color and marginalized communities, but making it okay because you're repackaging it as like the robot version. So it's okay to make fun of it. No, it's just wildly inappropriate, and you know that. And before I get the it's not that deep friend that's too woke allegations and people talking about, well, we're just talking about robots, it's like not real. Actually, no, let's pause. Let's put a pause on that. You're correct. Rosa Sparks is not real. However, the things that you're talking about and the things that you're referencing are existing scenarios that have actually happened and have impacted lives and communities. It's almost like, I don't know, a dog whistle. Ooh. And again, that's strange. That's weird.
This whole Clanker thing is a reminder that people love to be anti-Black. And coming from a Star Wars fan, like a huge Star Wars fan, I hate that the Star Wars fandom gave you guys that avenue. And coming from a Black man, I can't fucking stand that there's so many Black people hopping on this trend. And it's not even just anti-Black, bro. These motherfuckers just love to be racist. I've heard clinks. I've heard wirebacks. Tin skins, these are all derivatives of actual slurs. I don't care, bro. I'll be that friend that's too woke. This run its course and motherfuckers are too comfortable. Anti-Blackness should not be a joke that anybody finds funny, let alone Black people. I see Black people in the comments of these videos. Oh my God, how did you think of that? You're so funny. How did he think of that? How did he think of anti-Blackness and racism? They're showing us that we're always the butt of the joke to them, and y'all motherfuckers laughing at it. Swear to God, you need to be demelanated.
Why are people calling robots clankers with the hard ER? Like, who started that? Like, first of all, why is it even necessary to give robots a slur? Like, why are human beings doing that? That's weird in the first place. But second of all, why are people trying to say clankers with the hard ER? Almost as if they're trying to compare it to the N-word and like how horrible the N-word is.
But one less gag to clock is the AI misogyny of it all. And we're leaving this for last because it's not necessarily tied so much with these slurs as much as it is like the treatment of AI and the programming behind it, which I think is an interesting conversation. And this topic itself can be a whole entirely different video, but I thought it was important and at least semi-relevant to the conversation to at least include it a little bit. There have actually been studies that show that because AI, and specifically AI voice assistants like Siri, Bixby, and Alexa, are modeled after women, so it makes people behave in misogynistic ways towards them and portray misogynistic responses. Now, I will say it's more subdued now, but it was still enough to create studies on it. And you can see this documented in a 2019 New York Times article, stating that one particularly worrying reflection of this is the deflecting, lackluster, or apologetic responses that these assistants give to insults. The report borrows its title, "I'd Blush If I Could," from a standard response from Siri, the Apple voice assistant, when a user hurled a gendered explicitive towards it. Like, for example, when a user tells Alexa, "You're hot," her typical response has been a cheery, "That's nice of you to say." Siri's response was actually recently altered to a more flattened, "I don't know how to respond to that." But this report suggests that the technology remains gender biased, arguing that the problem starts with engineering teams that are staffed overwhelmingly by men. Siri's female obsequiousness and servility expressed by so many other digital assistants projected as young women provides a powerful illustration of gender biases coded into technology products, the report found. And it's not to say that this is intentionally nefarious or malicious, but again, this is another example of unconscious bias bleeding into our tech. And going back to the Coco of it all, when Cocos were first introduced, when they first hit the markets, on news outlets you can hear broadcasters using she/her pronouns for Coco.
Her name is Coco. She's about 2 feet tall, 5 feet if you add in the flag.
Men are creating AI girlfriends and then verbally abusing them. And the men are kicking off in the comments. Of course they are. Awesome. Women care more about the feelings of AI than men. You deserve the SA. Men are very simple creatures. They need to be led and they need to look up to people regardless of who it is all the time. But if you do not care for them, then it makes absolutely no difference. You deserve hell on earth for all they care.
Which is a little sus when you consider what Coco is. Like, because it's a robot that's serving you food, it's a woman? Interesting. But if you want to take this a step further and see how even more scary this is, it's interesting to note the fact that Cocos were vandalized, kicked, abused, and such when they first launched too. So I'm like, there are intersections here. But I guess to wrap up, while this all may sound very convoluted and like it doesn't mean that much, I do think it's first and foremost really important to remember that AI and robots are not human. And I think that starts with stopping the addition of human characteristics to these things, whether it's negatively or positively. That means no humanizing and then dehumanizing them with slurs, no pronouns, no other humanizing things because they don't need it. And also we don't need it because as we can tell just from this little snippet of what we've gotten, we don't know what to do with it. And I also think it's really important for us to reflect on why we've gotten to this point. Why do we feel the need to create slurs and promote slurs against robots and AI, especially the ones that are a little bit too reminiscent of ones that already exist? Like, is robot racism real? No, but good old fashioned racism definitely is. So let's stop saying Clanker.